slew of evictions because the details suggest that people who have current eviction notices or notices to quit may still be evicted. So we need absolute clarity that this eviction ban that the government have really been forced to introduce is actually going to prevent all current notices to quit and evictions leading families into homelessness. I mean, I am dealing with a slew of cases of families, working people who've done absolutely nothing wrong at the moment, who have current notices to quit and eviction notices, and unless this ban that the government have been forced to introduce actually deals with them, it's going to make little difference. But also we need a long-term solution, which means the government very proactively going in and buying up those tenancies so that it's not just till March that people have security, but they have permanent security by the government stepping in and buying those houses where people are threatened with homelessness and eviction, that they are converted into social and affordable housing. And that has to be a proactive policy. We've been arguing that the government should do it. Again, there's noises suggesting that they're going to do it, but it is far from clear, looking at the experience of families we're dealing with, that they're actually going to step in and secure the homes of people who are being threatened through no fault of their own, with eviction, with homelessness, with kids and so on being pushed into emergency accommodation. So what we need is absolute clarity that the eviction ban absolute clarity that the eviction ban they're talking about will prevent all families currently threatened with notices to quit or eviction from actually being driven into homelessness over the winter months. But then in the meantime, the government also have to step in, buy those tenancies, and that deals with the fear that the government keeps citing of landlords exiting the market. If landlords want to exit, fine, let the state buy up the homes so that those tenancies remain and that the families threatened with eviction and homelessness have a secure and affordable place to live in the future. And then it isn't a problem if the government are willing to do that, and they have plenty of money, particularly in the rainy day fund. There's €6 billion sitting there. Why not invest that now in securing people against homelessness and indeed increasing the social and affordable housing stock of the government, which it is desperately needed when you consider that all of their targets in housing for all are being missed. I also just think it's worth saying that the timing of the government's move towards introducing an eviction ban is not a coincidence. We publicly announced that they would be forced to vote on an eviction ban next week with the People Before Profit Eviction bill. So they've timed this to prevent them being embarrassed in a vote next week. We're glad they've been forced to move, but it has to actually be comprehensive protection from tenants who are being forced into possible homelessness, and it has to be long term by ensuring that the state purchases those tenancies and ensure people have social and affordable housing where they'll have a secure tenancy in the future.
Richard, sorry, how about people that are already homeless? I'm talking about working families that can't even get access to emergency accommodation. Is there anything in the motion proposal at all for them today?
Again, like for months, we have been saying they need to buy up the developer sites and near completed apartments and houses that are being built, where currently the state is only going to get 10% for social housing. They should be buying all of those developments, or a much bigger proportion, and that would create an immediate increase in the social and affordable housing stock to house people who are currently homeless. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous, the situation at the moment. I'm dealing with families where working people have been stuck in emergency accommodation for 4 years with children. And they have no prospect of getting anything currently. And sorry, I should also mention the social income housing thresholds. There's a whole cohort, and a growing cohort, of families who are caught completely in limbo because their income is slightly over the threshold, so they're not even entitled to emergency accommodation, to HAP support or social housing, and there's no affordable housing available for them. So that cohort also has to be dealt with by raising the threshold, something the government have consistently refused to do for years now, and have still not given any definitive answer as to whether they're going to do it.
Do you think that the argument that's supposed to be put forward from the Housing Minister is, well, before the budget, was about mom and pop landlords and them perhaps getting out of the market when they see that the prices are so high. Do you see any argument between now and into next year that they should get any break in terms of freeing up any...
But that simply wouldn't be an issue. If landlords want to sell and the state buys, the landlord sells their property, which is what they want, but the tenancies are secured and the number of rental properties remains the same. So the answer is blindingly obvious, and we've been arguing this for actually years. I mean, if you take the St. Helens Court example that we've cited again and again and again, where still the state haven't purchased that block, 4 years on, where they could prevent people from being evicted and provide new tenancies for other people. In that case, there's 15 empty apartments sitting there for 3 years, as well as a number of tenants being threatened with eviction. So it's win-win if the state goes in and buys up those tenancies. It deals with the problem of landlords exiting the market, it secures people's tenancies, and it increases the social and affordable housing stock, and it reduces the huge bill from RAS, HAPs and leasing costs that are currently costing the state nearly €1 billion a year.
What do you think about the concept of giving tax breaks to landlords to prevent that exodus?
It's totally unnecessary. The state just needs to buy the properties. Then you solve the problem. Then you are no longer reliant on landlords that may at any point sell up. As long as we are reliant on a private sector which is very, very precarious, you're not going to solve the homelessness crisis or the long-term need for secure, affordable rental property. The way to solve that problem is for the state to buy up the properties that could be exiting the market, and then they are secured in the rental market, and they're secured at affordable levels where the tenants and families currently threatened with homelessness or very precarious situations are then secured.
How does someone go about that in terms of, the actual, I suppose, practicalities of it? Be it that a private tenant is living in an apartment and their landlord approaches them and says they're going to sell up, or that a HAP resident also finds out that they're going to get the notice to quit. Is it the case that you think there should be a mechanism in place that if you get that notice that there's a step-by-step process about how...
As soon as the local authority gets a notice to quit on grounds of sale, the local authority should contact the landlord and offer to buy the property. The vast majority of cases, the council is already paying the rent through HAPs, RAS or leasing arrangements. And if you want a concrete example, which I brought up a number of weeks ago, a landlady contacted me who had actually agreed the sale of her house, but when she discovered her tenant would be made homeless, she cancelled the sale, approached the council, asked the council to buy the house to prevent her tenant being evicted, and the council have still not made it clear whether they're going to buy the house or not. Right? So that can solve the problem. It solves the landlord's problem, it solves the tenant's problem. But the government won't do it. I don't understand why they won't do it, but there is a solution to a lot of this crisis staring us in the face, which is the state has the resources to buy up properties that are exiting the market, secure tenants, secure families, and indeed save money on RAS, HAPs and leasing costs, which are currently draining the state for about €1 billion a year. I mean, we've been screaming at the government about this for a year. Finally, it seems they're suggesting they're listening, but are they actually listening? We will see over the next few days.
Thanks. You probably won't have as many questions for me, I doubt if you will anyway. Tomorrow, before the Health Committee, the Minister's bill on safe access zones is being scrutinised. And I just want to say that this is long overdue. There are abortion services in this country where regular pickets of anti-choice zealots appear to intimidate women and abortion service providers. And this bill for safe access zones should have been passed long ago, but for some reason the Minister chose not to use the bill that was going through the Seanad and instead has gone and reinvented the wheel and brought his own bill. Now, obviously we're grateful and delighted it's going to pre-legislative scrutiny tomorrow, but there has to be an urgency about it. And there's also a clause that was removed from the original bill before the Seanad that needs to be reinstated, and that is a clause that will not exclude nurses, cleaners, doctors, workers in medical settings from conducting industrial relations protests outside these settings. Rather, this is aimed at the anti-choice zealots, intimidating women and service providers. What it also does, in the absence of that legislation, it acts as a chill factor on doctors in particular and on service providers around clinics around Ireland, and we see that there is a lack and a serious under-resourcing of abortion services right throughout the state. And if we get this legislation through quickly, we believe that that will change, that more doctors, more GPs and more hospitals will be willing to engage in the provision of abortion services. So that's what we'll be focusing on tomorrow, and urging the Minister to put the clause that protects industrial relations activity and at the same time provides for the safe access zones.
What would you say to someone that said that bill would deny someone the right to protest?
It's not about denying the right to protest, about denying people the right to intimidate and harass both service providers and women seeking the service. Okay.
How you doing? So 2 points, one on pay as you go, one on workers' rights. So we'll start with pay as you go. There's a big contradiction now, isn't there? On the one hand, you've got a winter eviction ban, but on the other hand, we don't yet have a winter electricity and gas disconnections ban, or at least we don't have one that applies to all customers, including hundreds of thousands of pay-as-you-go customers. Seems to me that the government are taking an extraordinarily timid approach to the energy providers in general, who are pushing back against this, and to the pay-per-use companies in particular, who are pushing back against it. Minister Eamon Ryan is continuing his round of consultations with them this week. He's trying to kick the can down the road, but there's a 2-hour debate in the Dáil tonight. We welcome that. We'll be speaking in the debate, and the Minister and the government need to be clear. This issue is not going away, and winter's approaching fast. On the issue of workers' rights, I will be raising with the Taoiseach this afternoon the case of a company who have taken out an injunction against an employment regulation order that would see workers in the security services, security industry paid a minimum of $12.50 per hour. This company have been awarded the contract for providing security in the Department of Transport, and I'm going to ask the Taoiseach his views on that. I will also ask him as to whether he will ask the Minister to ask the company to drop this injunction and to pay their workforce at a very minimum the rates being recommended by the courts, and if they refuse to do so, if he will refuse to renew that contract when it is up. I understand that's after a year. This is an important issue of workers' rights, and a company that would go to such extraordinary lengths to maintain poverty pay in the security industry, well, the government seems to be turning a blind eye, and the government have questions to answer on this. That's it.
I'll be brief. Just one point in relation to the evictions ban is that we have been pushing for an evictions ban obviously for a long time. After COVID, the government response to all our calls for an eviction ban was to say, no, you can't do that, that's unconstitutional. Now the pressure is such, with the numbers of homeless people at almost 11,000, on track to rise probably over 12,000 or even 13,000 over this winter if there wasn't an eviction ban. all of a sudden the government's legal advice is to say, no, it's not unconstitutional to have an eviction ban after all. The point being that it is clear that the government has been using the Constitution as a fig leaf to hide behind when they're refusing to implement policies that would actually improve the conditions of renters. That's all it has been, that's all it is, it's entirely cynical. And linked to that, interestingly, is the point about the response by the IPOA, which has been, I think, quite callous, talking about, don't worry, people will still be evicted over Christmas even if this ban comes into place, which obviously they can't be if our understanding of the legislation is accurate. But the other interesting thing is I was on the news talk this morning with the chair of the IPOA, and she said at that stage that they would launch a constitutional challenge to the evictions ban. They've since changed that and said they're going to look at the government's recommendations, and I only presume that that's because if this goes to court and the court was to rule that there's no problem with evictions ban, well then the government would not have this fig leaf to hide behind in future. That would actually be very useful for tenants, for renters, for us, pushing in the door for proper rent controls, pushing for an evictions ban, that the government would no longer be able to say, oh, we can't do this because of the Constitution. So we'll see. If they took the court case, there could be quite a positive outcome potentially as a consequence of that. The main point I wanted to make is actually in relation to the data centres. Again, people know these data centres are using more electricity than all the rural homes in Ireland combined, and yet we've now had multiple admissions by the government in the Dáil last week and the week before, well, the week before in a written PQ, that these data centres will be in line to receive €10,000 a month of public funds through the TBES scheme. So that, raises the horrifying prospect that those who are suffering from energy poverty are going to be subsidising the extremely energy hungry activities of some of the biggest, richest corporations in the world. And so far the government has stood over that, has not said they're going to change the scheme, and we're going to be raising it again this week to say that that is utterly scandalous, that people in energy poverty will be paying to subsidise big data centres, and the scheme needs to be amended so that they can't access this €10,000 a month of public funds.